Assalamu alaikum. The sisters and brothers with kids, if you could control the kids a little bit so we could bring the noise level down, inshallah, so we could start the program. Inshallah, we'll start in the next 2 minutes. But as we do every week, we're going to start with the short recitation of the Quran by our Sheikh Uthman here. And then we'll introduce the speaker and we'll be done, inshallah, and we'll get to the program. Sheikh. Can't stop. You have to.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. والسماء بنيناها بأيد وإنا لموسعون. والأرض فرشناها فنعم الماهدون. ومن كل شيء خلقنا زوجين لعلكم تذكرون. ففروا إلى الله إني لكم منه نذير مبين. ولا تجعلوا مع الله إلها آخر إني لكم منه نذير مبين. كذلك ما أتى الذين من قبلهم من رسول إلا قالوا ساحر أو مجنون أتواصوا به بل هم قوم طاغون. فتول عنهم فما أنت بملوم وذكر فإن الذكرى تنفع المؤمنين. وما خلقت الجن والإنس إلا ليعبدون. ما أريد منهم من رزق وما أريد أن يطعمون إن الله هو الرزاق ذو القوة المتين. سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك أشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت أستغفرك وأتوب إليك. جزاكم الله خير.
فتح الله عليك.
So we're going to start the program. So I want to invite Brother Saqib to give us a quick introduction of the speaker tonight. We're definitely honored to have Sheikh Bradford here, Brother Saqib.
Assalamu alaikum. I'll keep it short because we want to give as much time as possible to Sheikh Joe Bradford. Firstly, you all have to know we are very fortunate to have Sheikh Joe Bradford here with us today. He's a very, very busy person, and he's going to be here tomorrow. And I'll give you a little bit of a primer about what he's going to speak tomorrow, but just his quick bio. He's a well-known American Islamic scholar of Islam, and with over 20 years experience studying and working related to the faith and the modern world. Traditionally and academically trained, he's a PhD candidate at the International Islamic University of Malaysia, working on issues related to injustice and wealth. So a lot of us obviously would want to learn a lot about wealth management, estate planning, and also today he's going to do the introduction to financial issues. Outside of his academic work, Joe is an ethical advisor and for a number of individual and companies. So tomorrow, Joe is going to be talking about private wealth or managing wealth, as well as estate planning. It's going to be slightly technical. It's going to be a workshop. So please spread the word and ask all your friends to register. So WhatsApp has been sent up a message. In that there's a link to register. So inshallah your time will be worthwhile tomorrow. So with that, I'll turn it over to Sheikh Joe for today's evening Halaqa program. Welcome, Joe.
Jazakallah khair. Bismillah walhamdulillah. Salatu wassalamu ala rasulillah wa ala alihi wa ashabihi wa man walahu wa ba'd. اللهم علمنا ما ينفعنا وانفعنا بما علمتنا وزدنا علما يا رب العالمين. O Allah, teach us what will benefit us and benefit us with what you've taught us and increase us in knowledge, O Lord of the worlds. So Brother Thaqib, mashallah, has been after me for some time, and I want to thank him for that, because mashallah, his diligence in making sure that I got here was top notch. Alhamdulillah. So inshallah, the reward for anything good that happens this weekend will go back to him, mashallah. I also want to thank, even though he's not here, thank Imam Asif, who has been telling me for years that I needed to come and visit, and wanted me to come visit while he was here, but we never got the chance, subhanallah. So I messaged him before I was on the way here, and he sends his salam, and he's happy to hear that everything is well here. So I'm sure most of you are in contact with him as well. So as Thaqib had introduced me, my work history and education has generally focused around Muslims and interaction with finance and money issues. And currently a lot of my work is working with individuals, couples, companies, nonprofits, in how to take their Muslim values and align them to the money that they have and the companies or the nonprofits that they manage. And then in my personal life, I volunteer in the community with Boy Scouts, with special needs organization Dar as-Sakina, which has a special needs Sunday school for Muslim children, teaches children of different special needs the beliefs of Islam according to their learning abilities, as well as Amana Refugee Services locally. And if we're going to cover everything tonight, I want to preface by saying this. We won't. So there's so much that can be covered, and there's only so much that can be covered in an event like this. But tomorrow, we're going to be going to in a lot more detail about investments, about wealth management, about stocks, about estate planning, wills, Islamic wills, trusts, the things that you need to do to prepare before you pass. Those are all going to be covered in significant detail tomorrow. Tonight, we're going to focus on issues of Islamic financing that are most frequently asked about in communities, given that this is of a family program. So, in general, what do we need to understand before we start talking about issues? One of the things that happens is that we can sometimes get extremely idealistic about financial issues, and then we think that there's nothing that is halal in the marketplace and everything is haram. And I'm sure that all of you have that one person in your family who is the, I think that's haram guy, right? You tell them, alhamdulillah, I got a new job. They offer me a 401k. I think that's haram. Are you sure? No, but I think so. Who told you? I don't know. So in some way, shape, or form, you've run into that person. So what we have is we have to balance. We have to balance the regulation and the markets that are set up here in the United States. We have to balance our ethics and our morals and what is best and what is good, what is better than the bad that we might have to choose between two bads, and therefore it's still an ethical question of which of the two bads do we choose, given that one might be more harmful than the other. And then we have the dictates of Islamic law, which, alhamdulillah, for the most part here in the United States, we have broad parameters to be able to operate in. So I want to start by talking a little bit about markets and a little bit about the stock market, because one of the chief questions that I get when anytime I talk to a community is, I heard that the stock market was haram, and I heard that investments are haram, and I was told that everything is riba. How many of you have ever been told that having an IRA is riba? So, a couple of hands. So that just unequivocal statement, like it is riba, it's the epitome of riba. And we'll cover what IRAs and 401ks and things like that are in a moment. But to understand that, first we need to understand the market as a whole. So I don't know how many of you are familiar with Russian dolls. So this little figurine here on the right, it's called a Russian doll. It's a doll that's carved, and you open it up and there's another doll inside, and another doll inside, and another doll inside, and another doll inside. And so if you don't understand what a Russian doll is, then hopefully you'll understand what a kilobyte and a megabyte and a terabyte is, given that we have so many people in our community in tech, right? So when you think about owning something, when you own a company and you have more than one person who owns that company, each person is given something called a company share, a share in the company. And that is the smallest building block of the market. Okay, of the stock market. And when you gather all of those shares together, those can be the outstanding shares for a single company. Well, what if I buy 100 shares of Apple and 100 shares of IBM and 100 shares of Microsoft and 100 shares of Intuit and 100 shares of Waste Management and 100 shares of any other company? And I put them all into one big bucket. That bucket that holds shares from a bunch of different companies, then that is a mutual fund or an ETF. If I want to access that fund or those shares, I need to do so through a certain account. So I need an investment account. That investment account, which functions basically, I put money in it, and then with that money I buy funds and shares, has to be held by another company that helps me manage it. That company is called a brokerage. That brokerage allows me the ability to access the market. And so all of these shares and funds and brokerages access the stock market and are accessed through the stock market. So the stock market is a collection of people that are buying and selling and investing in these companies. And the stock market is only one part of the economy. So a lot of people think, when we think, the Dow is up 3 points on news of the Fed pausing interest rates. They didn't pause interest rates. That's a hopeful example. People think, so when we hear the stock market, we must think the entire economy. No, the entire economy is much broader than just the stock market. It includes retail services. It includes other industries. So we're going from the smallest to the largest. Why are we starting with this? So that you get an understanding that when someone says to you, IRA is haram, you have to say to yourself, where does an IRA, an independent retirement account, where does it fit on this scale of things? Is an IRA an individual share of a company? Is it an account? Is it a type of brokerage? What is it? So always ask yourself the question, what is it that I'm trying to understand before you say that something is allowed or not allowed? Okay, I want to give you an example of how a share in the stock market works, or share in a company. Let's say that Brother Saqib and I, he heard that we have amazing tacos in Houston. We do, but he heard that, and he said, I want to bring a taco truck up here to Worcester, right? Did I say it correctly? I have been picked on for the past week. Do you say the R or not? Worcester. Okay. See? Anywhere I go, still being laughed at. So, he wants to bring one up here to Massachusetts and start a business. So I say, okay, well, I'll put in $10,000 and you put in $10,000, and now both of us own a taco truck that is worth how much? $20,000. So now I own 50% of the company and all of its assets, and he owns 50% of the company and all of its assets. I'm also responsible for 50% of the liabilities, and he's responsible for 50% of liabilities. So we hire an employee, and that employee works for those people that own the company. They don't own anything in the company, but they take a salary, which is now a liability or an expense on that company. So let's say that our taco truck, our employee is really great. He's making the best tacos. People are saying, we're so happy now, we don't have to move to Texas to have amazing food like this. And other people say, taco trucks are getting really popular, we want to buy them too. So the people selling the trucks, what do? They say, well, trucks are in high demand, we can get more money for them. So people start bidding. I'll buy, instead of your truck for $20,000, I'll buy it for $30,000. So now that truck has just gone up how much in price? Say it. 10,000, right? So it's gone up by 10,000, okay? So if a taco truck is worth 30,000, right? And then we divide that in half. Now I own $15,000 worth of the company, and Brother Saqib owns $15,000 worth of the company. Let's say that our yearly, the amount that we make every month, right, is around $3,600. But then because we start doing a lot more business, we make $6,000. That means I now have $2,400 worth of money that's coming to me as income from the company. So how did the price of the truck increase? It increased because more people wanted to buy trucks in the market. How did I make income? Because the truck itself was doing business and buying and selling tacos, and therefore it made money. So when a company's stock or the stock price goes up and down in the market, that means that more people want to buy the stock or less people need to buy the stock. And when the company's business makes money, they give that out and they call that dividends. When the price goes up or goes down, they call that capital gains. And both of those are a result of what? They're a result of legitimate halal business. They're not based on riba. They're not based on loans. They're not based on anything but the business activity of buying and selling the stock and the business activity of the company itself. So now, if all of you invested in our taco truck, and we divided it into, let's estimate how many people are here. 150, right? So we divided it into 150. Now you have 150, one 150th of the company. And you now, whenever the price of that company goes up, the price of your share goes up. And whenever we make money, we distribute it to those who are in the company. We could take the dividends and reinvest it into the company and do even more business. And therefore, it would become even better. The point being here is that the stock market is not simply built on interest. Companies making money are built on doing legitimate business. Now, are there companies out there that deal with interest? Yes, there are. But that does not mean that everything in the stock market and everything with companies is related to interest. So when I have shares of our taco truck and shares of Microsoft and shares of Apple and shares of Western Digital and shares of a bunch of other companies, and I put that into an account, that account, when the value of the account goes up, it goes up because of, Jazakallah khair, the legitimate business activities and trade in the market and the legitimate business activities of the companies. So when I make money in my retirement account, I'm not making money because interest has been deposited. I'm making money because the company's values have gone up. Now, in order for a stock to be acceptable, we have to screen it and make sure that the business activities of the company we invest in is permissible, and that the way that they manage their finances are permissible. So, for example, we don't invest in companies that deal with alcohol, tobacco, or drugs. We don't invest in companies that deal with gambling or betting operations. We don't invest in companies that deal with adult entertainment, cinema, and the like. We don't invest in conventional financial services because financial services are based on lending. We don't invest in defense and weapons manufacturing for the most part. Why? Because of the harm that they do. We don't invest in the food and beverage sectors where they're selling things which are haram, like pork and alcohol. So these broad sectors, if a company's not doing something haram and not earning their money through haram business activities, then the default is that they are permissible. Now we want to look at their business activities or their financial activities and make sure that they have acceptable amounts of debt so that they're not simply doing business, funding their businesses through debt and depleting the company of value. And we want to make sure that they're not involved in interest earning or interest bearing activities. And when we screen a stock and we find one that meets those conditions, then it's permissible to invest in. Now, what is this here on the screen? Does anyone realize what this is? Espresso. You have to say it right. There's no R. Okay, and the espresso is inside of what? What's the espresso inside of? It's inside of a cup. Are cups haram? You sure? For the most part. Yes, a cup. What's the ruling for cups? That they're allowed. Mubah. Right? You can drink out of your hand or you can drink out of a cup. Right? What's important about the cups and the vessels that we drink from? What's inside of it? Yes. Brother Ayman I automatically understood. What is inside this bottle is important. So if there was urine inside of this bottle, would it be permissible to drink? If there was whiskey inside this bottle, would it be permissible to drink? And if there's water, juice, milk, lassi, soda, Pepsi or root beer, right? You can have a number of things inside of this bottle. All of those things are permissible. So, the reason why I'm mentioning this is because when I say our checking accounts halal, our savings accounts halal, our 401ks halal, our IRAs halal, our 457Bs, our pensions, our 403Bs, our HSAs, or 529s, every single word that I just said is a type of account. That type of account is just a cup. It depends, the halal and the haram depends on what you put in it and what happens inside of that cup. So if I have a savings account where the savings are made from permissible investments, then the savings are permissible. But if the savings are made from interest, then the savings are not permissible. If I have an IRA where I invest in stocks that are Sharia compliant, then everything is permissible. But if I have an IRA where I only invest in money market accounts and fixed incomes and bonds and other companies that do things that are haram, then the money is impermissible. So it is not about the account per se, but what you put into the account and how the money is generated. Going back to the taco truck example. So, checking accounts, generally you have to pay for the use of a checking account if it falls underneath a certain amount, and there's no interest that is given on that account. Savings accounts, generally savings accounts, they will be paying you interest unless you ask them not to. Brokerage accounts. A brokerage account is the account that allows you to access the stock market. You put money into it, and then with that money, you purchase stocks in the stock market. And these are all accounts where if you make money inside of them, you may or may not be taxed. But the default is that you have already been taxed or you will be taxed on that money. There's also a type of account that's tax sheltered. And those are things like the individual retirement account, which is the IRA, which anyone can open. You can be young or old, male or female. The only condition is that you have earned income. You've earned money that year. And you can only put in up to $6,500 a year. And depending upon whether you want to pay taxes now or pay taxes later, that would depend upon if you want to have a traditional IRA or a Roth IRA. And so all of these details, I recommend, well, tomorrow we'll talk a little bit more about them, but I also recommend that whatever you hear tonight and you say, I don't understand that at all, just make a note of it and then go to a site like Investopedia or just go into YouTube and just type in, what is a Roth IRA? And you're going to find tons of videos and tons of articles that'll explain in depth with examples. A 401k is a type of account where you put in money and your employer matches that money, and then that money is invested in the stock market. And generally, you put in that money before you pay taxes on it, and then you pay the taxes later when you retire and you pull the money out. So now your money has grown, your employer gave you the gift of matching that money, and then you leave it until you retire. 403b, 457, all of those are pretty much the same. HSA is a health savings account, and you put in money before tax, it grows tax-free, and you spend it, and you're not charged tax. All of these accounts, why am I bringing them up? Not to go into the details of these accounts, but to say what's important is what you're invested in the account, not the type of the account per se. So you might say to yourself, how can I find Sharia compliant funds? Well, you can learn all of the calculations for them and how to make an Excel sheet, put in the ticker and calculate liquidity and calculate debt to assets ratio and calculate interest-bearing securities and look up the revenue streams. Or you can use this app that I helped create, that I'm an advisor to, called the Zoya app. So you go to zoya.finance, you can scan the QR code, you download the app, and then you say, let's say you want a ticker. Give me a ticker, somebody. VNO? Is that a fund or a company? It's a REIT? Okay. So it will find VNO, and then it will tell you what the holdings of that company are, or that fund is, and then it will give you shorthand for whether or not it is Sharia compliant or not, based on the IOFI standards. Now, the IOFI standards are standards that were created by a group of scholars from 35 different Muslim countries that went and created standards on investing and accounting and banking and so forth, so on and so forth. And then once you find the stock that's permissible and acceptable to you, then you can go and purchase it through your brokerage account, your traditional Roth IRA. If you have a self-directed 401k, you can purchase it directly, or you can use the Zoya app, as we will have trading available through the app soon. So this is the quickest way to find Sharia-compliant investments or stocks or funds to invest in. Now, for those of you who want the head start, you can take a shot of this, because everybody says, okay, well, what if I don't know what to buy? Most of us, when we're investing, need nothing more than 3 to 4 funds. SPUS, AMANX, AMAGX, and then something that holds value like precious metals, Bitcoin, or just cash. So what I've done up here is I've put all of these types of tickers, and if you look up these tickers, you'll see that many of them have already been pre-certified as Sharia compliant, so you don't have to worry about anything after that. And they have great returns as well. Okay. Now comes one of the other most frequent questions, and that is home purchases versus renting. And then when we talk about home purchases, how should I purchase? So a lot of times people will come and they'll say, you don't need to buy a home. You should just rent. But is that an acceptable answer everywhere? No, it's not. It really depends on where you live and what the economy is like at that time. Because there are some places in the US, yes, it is better for you to rent than to buy. And there are some times in your life where it is better to rent than to buy. Yes, they say the American dream is to have a home. But in reality, the American dream should be to never be financially dependent on anyone. I'll give you a story. A good friend of mine, he was working for a major oil and gas company in Houston. And they said to him, we're going to ship you off to the field. So you get 2 choices. You can either go to Midland, Texas, or you can go to Kazakhstan. And he said immediately, Kazakhstan. I'm not going to Midland. I didn't understand why. He said, do you understand what you have to do to get to Midland? I said, no. He said, you have to fly to Laredo. Then you have to take a bus to the next city. Then you have to take a car to Midland. Or you can get one of those little propeller prop planes. He said, I'm absolutely not going out there. He said, but for Kazakhstan, I fly Houston to Istanbul, Istanbul, Kazakhstan. I'm done. On a comfortable flight. So why am I telling you this story? Because he got that call the day before he was going to close on a house in Houston. And he was able to back out. If he had not backed out, what would have happened? He would have then been stuck with payments on a house that he was not living in, and he would have had to find a family member to manage it or hire a management company, and that would have all cost money. And then he would have to have somebody take care of the taxes and the lawn and the repairs and all of that. So a number of times people think as soon as I get a job, I'm going to go and buy a home. That's not the best idea sometimes. The best idea sometimes is to continue to rent, save as much as you can, invest as much as you can, and then see where your career is going to go before you try to buy a home. Now, if you're buying a home for your parents because your parents are settled in a place, absolutely buy that home. Absolutely. If your parents need the home, absolutely help them. But for yourself, always think about long term. Why is it important to differentiate between these two? Because sometimes while you build equity in a home that you own, you have the freedom to leave a rental. Also, buying a home requires more upfront costs, many times can require more monthly costs if you have issues like maintenance Also, with renting, you get flexibility. With buying a home, not so much. And with home ownership, you save more on taxes because of deductions, but renting doesn't give you those deductions. And then affordability. Renting is more affordable in the short term. Buying a home is more affordable in the long term. So it really depends on where you are in life. Now, the number one question after that is, how do I buy a home? What Islamic mortgage should I use? Now, I'm going to mention this, and please, no one ask me in the Q&A, or nor walk up to me and say, you can tell me privately, it's not a problem. I don't talk about, when I give these types of lectures, I do not talk about the companies that are doing this work. But I want to empower you with the ability to evaluate those companies. So when you're approached to buy a home, you can tell whether or not they're giving you a good deal or not. So there's 4 main ways that homes are sold in the United States. Murabaha, which is a cost plus sale. Ijara, which is a lease to own. Diminishing musharaka, which is a partnership and lease. And istisna, which is like a construction loan for new homes. We're going to do the top 2 that are used by mortgage companies. And that is the murabaha and the diminishing musharaka. So how it should work when you are doing a murabaha or a cost plus or a markup sale is you should go and identify the home that you want to buy. And then you tell Bradford Mortgage Company, I want to buy that home. And Bradford Mortgage Company comes and says, okay, I'll buy it for you, take title to the home, so I actually own the home and hold liability, because the Prophet ﷺ forbade us from selling something that we don't own. And then I resell it to you over time for a markup. We say, let's look at the price of the home plus the markup that I want. We'll divide it over 15, 20, 30 years. You'll pay that amount monthly, so that when 30-year ends, this is how much you've paid. You pay off over the tenor of the agreement. You hold title, which means you're responsible for the home, for the insurance, for the expenses, for the maintenance. But when the home price goes up, you get to keep all of that additional wealth. I don't get anything of it. Now, there's 2 things to look out for from a company that's trying to sell you a home or facilitate the purchase of a home with murabaha. Number 1 is that if they are only intermediating the sale and never holding liability for the property that they're selling. Meaning that they never actually purchase the home and then resell it to you. So they're only coming in with money and charging you for that money. It's no different than a cash for cash loan. They're just taking the home as a security for that loan. Secondly, is if they're demanding that they won't buy the home to resell to you until you agree to purchase it from them. The problem with that is that they're not allowed to sell something that they don't own. So they can't agree to sell you something that they don't own. And you can't agree to buy something that they don't have the ability to sell you. So if you find those 2 issues happening with these type of sales, then avoid that. Otherwise, if they're actually buying it and reselling it, and they are not asking you to take that kind of contractual agreement up front, then it is acceptable. The second is the diminishing musharaka. And this has become extremely popular in the last couple of years. Not popular because it's necessarily better or fairer, but because it is easier for the companies to use and allows them to profit more. So what happens is you and the financing company create a partnership. You put in 20% of the money, they put in 80% of the money, and then you pay rent to the partnership. And then your ownership increases over time and your rent goes down over time. So all of this is actually done all around the world in Muslim majority countries and elsewhere, and there's no problem with that. But what you have to look out for is this. Is the partnership real, or is it just a fiction? Meaning, are they telling you that they're a partner, but they're only doing it so that they can put the money into the purchase of the house and then resell the house later on? Is the LLC that they're creating actually a real LLC, or are they using something which is going to expire after 6 months to a year? Also, are you being obliged to assume all the liability? Are they saying, look, you're going to pay, we're partners, and anytime the price of the house goes up, then we both share in that price. And when it goes down, we share in it going down. However, you have to pay all of the insurance, all of the maintenance, any damages to the core of the home are yours. If they do that, then that renders the partnership invalid Islamically. As Islamically, the chief condition of a partnership is that you share in the liabilities just as you share in the gains. And then lastly, what they do is they say, well, since you're renting, we'll make you provide all of the insurance and take care of all of the expenses, and you'll assign all of the insurance payouts to us. And so what you'll do is you'll find some companies, not only will they'll say you'll assign all insurance payouts to us, but you will also give a personal guarantee, and if you have a business, give a business guarantee. Right? And so all of that offsets the validity of the partnership and makes it one-sided, meaning that the financier was only trying to sell you something to profit off of you and not really create a partnership. Right? So watch out for those issues. Now, we're going to go into the last couple of topics, and I'm going to touch on them briefly, show you some resources, and then one of those topics we're actually going to go into some detail tomorrow. Charity and zakat. I've written a book on zakat called Simple Zakat Guide. It's in its 3rd edition now, so the cover looks a little bit different, but you can find it on Amazon.com. Zakat is 2.5% of your savings that you have for more than a year. Your personal property is not included, so no, you don't pay zakat on the value of your home or your car or your furniture, all right? And essentially you will pay your debts first and then calculate what assets you have and then multiply those by 2.5%. And what assets are liable for zakat will differ depending upon your ability to access them. So you can access all of the cash in your sock drawer, you have to pay on that cash. You can access all of the money in your bank account, you have to pay on that. You can access the contributions to your IRA, but not the gains. You pay on the contributions, not the gains. You can't access the 401k at all. A couple of different opinions on that. I hold that you don't pay on it unless you actually withdraw money or you've reached retirement age and you can access all of that. And all of that's included in the book. Also, with your charity, I think communities really have to plan wisely. Think about, if I have to pay zakat al-mal every year, and I have to give zakat al-fitr every year, and I do udhiyah every year, where can I make this most effective? Meaning that if you do udhiyah and you slaughter here in the States, a lot of times there's a lot of waste. But if you were to send that overseas to an orphanage or with people in need, they would use much more of the animal. So therefore, you can be much more effective by sending certain types of charity to certain places. And by keeping cash and giving cash here, you can be more effective, right? Also, for those of you who are in retirement age and you have an IRA, please understand that if you have an IRA, you can actually have the IRA give charity on your behalf to a registered 501c3. So for example, if your practice is to give your zakat to Bradford Islamic Center, and then they distribute it to the poor in the area, you go to your IRA, you order the IRA to pay to with the EIN of WIC, and then it transfers that directly to them. Why is that important? Because you don't have to realize that amount as income, pay taxes on it, and then give it away. So you actually save more money for yourself and more money for the poor. Next, and this is one of the topics that we're going to go into in some detail tomorrow, and that is estate planning. So there are essentially 5 key components to having a good estate plan. One is to have an Islamic will, one that is legally valid and Islamically compliant. 2 is to have a marital property agreement if you live in a state where marital property is conjoined from the time of marriage. Why do you want that to happen? Because you don't want people mistaking what is yours and divided it in half between you and your spouse when you die. I'll give you a quick example about why this is important. So in Texas, we have something called community property. Do you have community property here in Massachusetts? Just from the men going, it's not, that means that, because if it was here, they'd be like, oh yeah, we have, it's horrible, right? So just from the down, what community property is everything you earn from the time that you get married and all property that you purchase from the time that you get married is split 50-50 between you and your spouse. And the mistake that we make in our community sometimes, especially as sisters, they go, oh, that's great. It's not great. You know why? Because not only do you split the money, you split the debt. And that confuses people as who owns what when it's time to distribute inheritance. So I'll give you two stories. One, a lady told her husband, we need to have an Islamic will. He said, absolutely not. Islamic wills are unjust. We have 3 daughters. They're not going to get as much. I'm not going to allow that. So his wife dies. She didn't get the will. He didn't get a will. She dies. And he immediately takes 50%. He takes the house because it's joint tenancy with right of survival. He takes 50% of everything that is hers. Of the things that were hers were a safe full of gold that she was saving for her daughter's wedding. She had 3 daughters. She was saving gold, and she had gifted it to them, but had not given it to them because she was waiting for the wedding. He took that, 50% of that too. 50% value of everything. What would have happened if it was divided Islamically? The daughters would have taken 2/3. And then the father would have taken 1/3. And then if there were any other relatives, it would have been divided. So he would have gotten less than what the girls had gotten. Plus, that gold would not have been included. It would have went to them completely. So the idea that somehow having an Islamic will is unfair or is going to cause harm is not true. Another one dealing with marital property, and I just talked to this sister recently, and she said, please tell my story when you go to communities. She said, I was a working professional. I married. My husband he owned a business with his family. We got married. We never did a prenup. We said, we love each other, community property. It turned out that he was going and taking out loans in my name, underwriting debts from his family's company. And when I discovered it and I told him that I wanted a divorce, he claimed 50% of all of my retirement, all of my property, and then said that I had to pay the debts. She said, so I've been set back for life because of not having a prenup and giving into community property. Okay. So a marital property agreement basically says if you share something, it's mentioned, and if you don't share something, it's mentioned. So everything is clear. So am I saying that it's wrong to share property? I'm not saying that. But if you share it, you should know it, and you should know the extent of what you share and the extent of the debts that you're going to pay for someone else so that you're not caught off guard in the case of death and divorce. Then there's an advanced healthcare directive. We'll talk more in detail about that tomorrow, which gives instructions to your family about what happens when you're ill. And there's a family declaration, which is advice to your family. And then there is a trust if you need it. Generally, you need a trust in 2 situations. You need a trust if you have property that needs to be transferred to someone, or actually 3. Property that needs to be transferred to someone without going through probate, or you have an estimated, or you will have an estimated $11 million or more at the time of your death, meaning if you have $5 million of net worth now, and you foresee making that much in the next 20 years, you probably want a trust so that you can pass that money to your family without being taxed. And then 3, if you have a special needs child, you need to get guardianship and a special needs trust in place for that child. Why do I mention that? Because so many families think, well, it doesn't matter. I'll always be caring for them. The truth is that depending upon the level of needs that your children have and the type of special needs that they are, they may be declared independent, or they may be able to choose later who cares for them. And that means that all of their benefits and all of the money that's there for them could be taken advantage of by somebody outside of the family. So you want to make sure that you get them the care that they need. You don't preclude them from government benefits because of your money, and you don't allow them to be taken advantage of later on. Now, the most important component here in all of this is the Islamic will. Most of us don't have $5 million. Many of us do not have special needs. Many of us don't have property that needs to go to a very specific person. And therefore, my partner and I, who is a estate planning and corporate attorney in Florida and California, we created this company called My Wasiyah. Most size fits most, or a one size fits most tool. Meaning that if you need a will, you need to name guardians, you need to have a personal representative, and you need to leave your property and have it divided Islamically. That's what this will do. It will do it for an affordable cost. You won't have to spend thousands of dollars, and it will be specific to your state's laws as well as the Islamic inheritance rules that apply to your situation. Now, there's two other ways you can do it. You can hire a lawyer, and that's your prerogative, or you can do a handwritten will, and there's chances that a handwritten will might be thrown out. We'll talk more about that tomorrow. So with that, we are at the end, and I want to leave some time for questions and answers. And I know that Brother Osman also said that there's dinner, so we want to make sure that the dinner... Brother Osman here? No, he's not here. I want to just make sure that we're respecting time. If you want more information, videos, courses, articles, you want to book a call with me, you can do all of that through my website, joebradford.net, and I'm happy to answer any questions that you have while I'm here. Jazakallah khairan for listening diligently, and I hope that anything that I said was of benefit. Wa sallallahu wa sallam ala nabiyyina Muhammad.
Questions? Assalamu alaikum. Jazakallah khairan for the talk. Question for you. So there was a few accounts up there, and there's one I didn't see. Credit cards, if you're using them and completely paying them off every month, is that a haram, or is it?
So about credit cards, understanding how credit cards work is necessary to understanding the rulings for credit cards. Credit card companies actually don't make money off of interest. The companies that make money off of interest from credit cards are actually your bank. So with every credit card, there are... See if this is working. Okay. With every credit card, there are three parties involved. There's something called the issuing bank. There is the credit card company like Visa or MasterCard or American Express. And then there's the point of sale. Okay? So what happens is when you apply for a credit card, Visa says, yeah, we'll allow this guy to use our credit card network. But you, the bank, you have to issue the card, and you have to guarantee for us that if he doesn't pay, you're going to pay. So you go and you charge, and then you don't pay your bill. What happens is Visa says, hey, Chase Bank, whatever, credit union, your guy didn't pay, you need to pay us. So then they pay Visa. Then your bank says, hey, we paid a debt for you, now we're going to charge you interest on top of that debt. That's where the interest comes in. So the question Islamically is it permissible to agree to a contract if there's a condition that is impermissible in it? And this is a classic debate between scholars. In common law, it's called severability. In Islamic law, it's called tafriq as-safqa. And that is, can you split the contract from the condition? هل الشرط الفاسد يفسد العقد الصحيح? Does an invalid condition invalidate a valid contract? And perhaps the stronger of the two is no, it does not. How do we know this? From the hadith of Aisha radiallahu ta'ala anha in Sahih Bukhari, that the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam was approached and asked about the freeing of Barira. Barira radiallahu anha was a woman who was enslaved by a family in Medina, and they gave her the option to purchase her freedom. She didn't have the money. So she went to Aisha and she said, they've given me the option to purchase my freedom. Now what happens at that time in a way of reforming society was that anytime someone freed a slave, that slave would become part of the family. Meaning that the family now had a responsibility to care for them if they weren't able to. They would inherit from each other. They would even sometimes take their last name or their tribal name. So it was a way of rehabilitating people into society. So Aisha said, if I'm going to buy your freedom, I get that right. The family said, no, you can buy the freedom, but we want that right. And they insisted. So Aisha went to the Prophet ﷺ. She said, am I allowed to go and free her? He ﷺ said, اعتقيها واشترطي لهم الولاء فكل شرط ليس في كتاب الله أي شرع الله فهو باطل ولو كان 100 شرط. Free her, give them the condition that they're asking for, because every condition that is not found in the book of Allah, meaning in the law of Allah, then it is invalid even if it's 100 conditions. So the individual condition didn't invalidate the contract. Now that said, I'm not saying everyone go and get credit cards and max them out. That's not what I'm saying. Because most people do not spend responsibly. So if you know that you are not responsible with money, then the best thing that you can do if you have a credit card is cut it in half and only spend from cash. But if you can spend responsibly and you need it for certain consumer protections, and you pay your bill well before the settlement date, not just the due date, then it's permissible for you to do that as long as you do two things. Number one, you are debit spending, not debt spending, meaning you're spending in the parameters of how much you make, not more than you make. And number two, that you pay your bill well before that amount becomes due so that no interest is charged. Inshallah, if you do that, then it's permissible. Now I'm going to add on to that, and that is credit card reward points and cash back are permissible and they are not riba. Why? Because where they come from is neither the bank nor the credit card company. They come from the point of sale. So let's say, for example, I get 3% cash back on a sale, and I go to Walmart and I buy something for $100. What they say is, if you bought with $100, we're going to give you 3% back. Well, we charged a fee to the point of sale, to Walmart, right? So we're going to give you a little bit of the money that we made off of them back to you since you bought it. So that's coming as a commission or a reward. It's not coming from cash for cash. And Allah knows best.
Assalamu alaikum, brother. Jazakallah khairan. One maybe clarification. I think you mentioned that 5 million for the trust. I think it's maybe depends on the state. Like, for example, in Massachusetts, if you have assets over 1 million, then I think you have to really pay the taxes. Like, as under 1 million, then I'm just curious. Like, maybe you can clarify. It's probably 5 million is just for taxes, maybe.
Do you have state taxes here?
Yes.
Okay, so that's why. So I was speaking about federally because we don't have state taxes in Texas. God bless Texas.
Okay. Yeah. So I believe Massachusetts, because I just have to.
So definitely, depending upon the state that you're in, the rules will differ, and so it's important to speak with a tax attorney about that. But federally, during the Trump administration, the ceiling was raised to 11 million. But my point is that if you have significant net worth, like 5 million or more, just as a rule of thumb, then start to explore a trust. Because what happens with these types of things is many times people go, I'm going to do it, inshallah next year. okay, now I'm retired, my kids will do it for me, and then they pass, and then everybody says, what happened to all of the net worth that my parents had saved and retired with? And it goes towards expenses and taxes and a number of other things. So if you have that net worth now, that's the trigger for you to take it seriously and get the job done. Jazakallah khairan for that point.
I'll check one. First, the ladies, I'll come back to you.
I was just curious, the companies, the way that they borrow money and, they have to pay interest on a lot of the loans that they have, does this at all affect the permissibility of investing in certain companies because they might use your money they're using some money to pay off interest, loans, and they can also do things that are potentially haram, even if it's tiny, if it was Apple, they might use it to have impermissible apps in their app store, right?
Right.
Does this impact the permissibility of?
Yes. So, and that's a very good question. It does impact the permissibility and the impermissibility. So there's two things that you want to look at. One is you want to look at, it's preferable to have a company that has no interest-bearing debt whatsoever. And number one, that they have no revenue that comes from anything which is haram. Now, because financial statements are generally backwards looking, meaning that you only know what the company did after they did it. So when you get the financial statements and you see that there's, for example, 0.001% interest income from XYZ company, what's obligatory for you to do is to take your gains, calculate it by that amount, and then give that amount away in charity so that you're not holding impure wealth. And in my book, Simple Zakat Guide, I put all of the calculations for doing that, right? Now, if the company gets to a point where they're doing that so frequently and it becomes part of their main revenue, meaning 5% or more of what they do, then you have to divest from that company, right? So there's generally three ways that you divest from a company. Number one is that their business revenue is coming from haram, either anything more than 5%. Why is 5% less? Because that's the threshold for a primary versus a secondary earning activity. And that means that it might not be the mainstay of what they do. So if they do it and then they correct it, then you can stay invested. But if they do it and they keep doing it, then you should leave. Secondly is if they have interest-bearing debt in the amount of 30% or more. And then thirdly is if their revenue's fine and their finances are fine, but they are facilitating oppression. Like, for example, they have they put company headquarters in occupied land, or they use slave labor, right? Or they have oppressive business practices. Then you have to divest from that as well. So thank you so much for that question. It's very important.
Jazakallah khair.
And of course, with all of this, there's a lot more detail. My point here is kind of giving you guys the introduction to these things, and then hopefully, you'll find more resources on this elsewhere, inshallah.
Assalamu alaikum. I think my question is very similar to hers. Is, for example, a company's main business, for example, it's an airline. The main company, it's flying, but they also sell alcohol.
Yeah.
Is that along with the 5% too, or is that different? Because the main revenue is not coming from alcohol. So.
Actually, with airlines, one of their main revenue streams is alcohol. Catering and alcohol on airlines, for some airlines, is actually the only way that they make profit. Because they've been cut so deeply because of ticket prices and taxes that they move towards that. So always investigate any company. Never assume that because the name of the company is, X, Y, like for example, what's Russell Branson's space thing? Not SpaceX. What is it? Virgin Atlantic, right? Is it Virgin Atlantic or Virgin Space?
Virgin Galactic.
Not the airline, the space company. Virgin Galactic. So you go, Virgin Galactic, they do space stuff. That's great. Maybe 5% of the money that they make comes from taking government payloads. Everything else is interest income from bonds that they're investing in. Everything else. So never simply read the name and say, yeah, it's fine. Always do your homework.
So Sheikh, to that point, right, you have companies like Costco and Amazon. They sell pork and alcohol. So even that has to be less than 5%, right?
Yeah, and sometimes they'll have multiple revenue streams that are, and each of those revenue streams are haram. So it has to be cumulatively 5%, cannot be more than 5%. So things like Costco and Amazon and other retailers should be avoided.
Yeah, 1 second.
Assalamu alaikum and jazakallah for coming. So I have a question about credit cards. Sometimes what happens, they give you 15 months, 18 months interest free, but then there's a fee to sign up for that. Is that halal?
That should be avoided. Yeah. Credit cards for fees should be avoided.
No, just the fee.
Yeah, you're saying they're going to give you that interest free, but you have to pay a fee to be able to get it. Yeah, that should be avoided.
That should be fine, right?
No, it should be avoided. You should not do it.
Sorry?
You should not do it. You should not do it. Yeah.
Yeah, I have two questions.
Please.
The first one is related to the Aisha with the obedience to the engagement, because about the conditions that Rasulullah told her to. That's fine, because she is not obliged to obey by this law. But in our time, in the US, if you have a credit card and you accept the conditions, you have to pay. I mean, or take the conditions. You cannot say, no, I am Muslim, I cannot do it. So what's the situation here? And my second question is, if you have shares in of company, and you know that most of the businesses, they have equity, and they use business loans but from banks, and that there is interest, meaning every share I have percentage of the loan. Is that permissible or not?
Great questions. So concerning the issue of the invalid condition, yes, you are correct that the law would say, well, you signed the contract and you'll be legally obliged to pay that, right? Now, the first thing that you should do is anytime, if you do, I'm not saying to go and get a credit card, but if you do, and if you get into the situation where they charge interest, then the very first thing you do is you call them. And I know because I've seen this happen. You call them and you say, I noticed what I think is an erroneous charge on my card, and I'm wondering if you can remove that. And they'll say, oh, well, yeah, sure, we can do that. And they forgive that interest. So that's possible. So it's not all that you always have to pay it. But if they refuse, you will have to pay it. And if you've fallen into that situation, you will be sinful. There's no way around that. So if a person doesn't want to ever be faced with that situation, they shouldn't get a credit card. But if they have a need for one, then they have to be cognizant of that. So you draw attention to a good point. With regards to companies that have bank loans and funding and things like that, that is a real issue. Most of the fiqh councils that have opined on this have said that it is preferred that a person only invests in companies with zero debt and zero interest-bearing income, interest-bearing instruments. That way they don't fall into that issue. But with many companies having many different owners and that happening, they've allowed that threshold of 1/3, a thuluthu wa thuluthu kathir. Now, obviously, that's something that's debated amongst scholars, right? The IOFI standards, the Dow Jones standards, they've allowed that. But even though they allowed it, they still said that what is better is for not to invest in that at all.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. I have a couple of questions, but I'm just going to ask one or two if possible. Are there any Islamic finance companies, without naming any, because you said you don't want to name any, are there any Islamic finance companies that effectively implement the modes of financing that you listed that fall under the acceptable modes of finance?
Yes, there are.
Okay, thank you. And if it's more expensive for me to rent than to buy, is it still better for me to buy even for the short term so as to not harm myself financially?
It's a great question. So with regards to buying versus renting, I believe that every situation and every person's situation is going to be different. And before you get into any type of long-term major purchase, there's 3 questions you have to ask yourself. Number 1, does it make financial sense? Because not everything that seems like it's a great deal is a great deal. The purchase itself might be harmful financially, or not doing the purchase might be harmful financially. So find out where the benefit is in that. Number 2 is, have I done my due diligence in finding alternatives? Have I explored what is possible for me? And number 3 is, am I willing to stand in front of Allah with the decision that I've made on the Day of Judgment? Because no Sheikh, Mufti, Alim, Peer, Imam can come and answer for you on the Day of Judgment. Each and every one of us will be individually asked by Allah on the Day of Judgment about the money that we earned, the money that we spent, and where we made it, and what we did with it, before our feet even move. And so it's important to know that if you say on the Day of Judgment, well, Joe Bradford said, Joe Bradford is going to run far away from you. يَوْمَ يَفِرُّ الْمَرْءُ مِنْ أَخِيهِ وَأُمِّهِ وَأَبِيهِ وَصَاحِبَتِهِ وَبَنِيهِ. The day when a person will run away from his own mother and father, his own brother and sister, his own children. لِكُلِّ امْرِئٍ مِّنْهُمْ يَوْمَئِذٍ شَأْنٌ يُغْنِيهِ. Every individual will have what worries them on that Day of Judgment. So any decision that you make for a major purchase, understand, does it make financial sense? Is it more harmful than other alternatives? And then are you willing to stand in front of Allah with that decision? The brother here had in the front with the mask.
I'll ask one, I think from the sister's side. Is there any question?
Because he's literally on the edge of his seat.
Assalamu alaikum.
Assalamu.
Can we have savings or checking accounts that have interest?
So you should not have savings or checking accounts that have interest. So what do? Most of us actually don't need a savings account. Meaning that what you need is a place to put your money, and most checking accounts don't pay interest. So find an interest-free checking account. Now, if you have money that you want to save and you want that money to make money for you, there's actually better halal alternatives that will make you more money. So interest-bearing, high-yield interest-bearing accounts pay what nowadays? 5%. Oh, yeah, if you're with Goldman Sachs Apple account. But other than that account, most high-yield accounts are only giving 1%. It's only now, with the financial problems where they are, that people started to go back up to 3, 4, right? Apple has this thing with Goldman for 6%. You can get from 5 to 8% by taking your savings and putting it in a basket of gold, silver, and palladium. Grows consistently. Yes, there'll be a little bit of volatility, but if you used gold ETF, the GLD, SLV, and SPPP, which are gold, silver, and then platinum and palladium, you would see better gains than if you kept that cash in a savings account that's interest-bearing. And you'd make more money off of it as well. And you'd preserve wealth. So the halal alternative is actually better than the haram. So no, you should never have a checking or a savings account that is earning interest, and you should be putting your money where you can make halal money.
So Sheikh, the follow-up question to that, so how do they have to move to a brokerage account from a checking and savings to buy gold, silver, etc., right?
Yeah, so now, depending upon the bank, some banks have actually started to allow you to tie in a brokerage account with limited access to funds. And because these are ETFs, you should be able to access them. Or you can use something like M1 Finance, which is an app which is very convenient. Actually, they can issue you a debit card that you can pull out cash from as well. So there are a lot of options that are out there.
Thank you. I have a question regarding self-directed brokerage accounts where the current economic conditions actually rewards you for keeping high funds in certain accounts where I don't want to name the companies, but certain brokerage accounts are offering like 4.95% on uninvested funds. So is keeping funds in a self-directed brokerage account and just keeping the funds there uninvested, does that constitute as indirectly investing in the company, and the yield on those funds, is that halal or haram?
So most of the yield that's made on those cash accounts. So if you were to look at, say, for example, like Fidelity, right? They actually don't hold your money in cash. They hold it in a cash equivalent that they call SPXX. And essentially what that is short-term money market funds that span between 12 to 72 hours that are invested in short-term interest rates and kind of hedge against that. So all of the money that's being made off those things is interest, is riba, wouldn't be allowed. So, either you can opt for an FDIC-insured cash account through those brokerages, or you can just keep it invested in securities and then dollar cost average into your positions. But to willfully go for that interest rate, you're just investing in something interest-bearing, which would not be allowed. Okay. Brother Usman said that's it, guys.
No, it's not. It's not it. Obviously, it's almost Salah time, so we want to do a couple of quick announcements, and then so I'll finish the announcements, and then the Sheikh can conclude his talk. But I want to remind everybody, as you can see, the Sheikh boiled this down to really something we could all digest tonight. But if you haven't registered for tomorrow, please register, because he's going to go into more details and he's going to go into more examples. And you're going to have all these questions that you have answered. I know it's not going to be easy for everybody to register and come, but for those who can, please try and register and come tomorrow so you could benefit from the class. Also, a quick announcement. We're going to have dinner. There's plenty of dinner for everybody. So right after Salat, we go downstairs in the cafeteria and have dinner. As you could hear from tonight, a lot of kids, a lot of noise. It's okay, but I will encourage the parents, if you could keep the kids with you, please do that so we could minimize the noise. As we just witnessed, this is the kind of Friday night Halaqa that the board is actually promoting, both on the financial side, the religious side. Other topics are coming, and we're trying the best we can. The board is trying to do the best they can to bring top quality speakers and everything. So the thing that bring a lot of us here, including myself, is the food, the dinner that we eat. So we need sponsorship for the dinner. Okay, so the sisters have told me it's $2,250 $1,250 to sponsor the dinner. If you could sponsor the dinner, we have roughly about 35 to 40 weeks till the next Ramadan. So we're kind of looking ahead that way. So if you could sponsor it, please let me know if you know somebody that could sponsor it. We're also coming up with different ideas that we could use to sponsor this, so we could keep this program, because it's so important for the masjid. This, for some of us, this is the only time we're able to come to the masjid and actually spend time with our families in the masjid, because we're not able to do it other times of the week, and we're not able to spend this much time after Jummah because most of us have to go back to work. So this is important time, family time for all the Muslims in the area. So we want to keep this. So please help us do that. Is Brother Sharif here? Brother Sharif's mother-in-law died in Egypt today. So he's asked for your du'as, please. If you make du'a tonight, remember Brother Sharif's mother-in-law. She passed away in Egypt. May Allah give her, have mercy on her and give her a Jannatu Firdaus, inshallah. And then finally, after dinner, we have the program here tomorrow. So if people could stay behind a little bit and help set up for tomorrow, that would be great. And then just everybody, if you could clean after yourself, it would just make the whole process easy for us, inshallah. Thank you so much, Sheikh. Now you could conclude.
Jazakallah khair. I've got this one, yeah. Okay, so Jazakumullahu khairan. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala have mercy on Brother Sharif's family and forgive them, enter them into Jannah, and give solace to the family that remains. Ameen. I wanted to thank everybody for inviting me out. And inshallah ta'ala, I look forward to seeing you all tomorrow. Inshallah, we will have a long program tomorrow, and there will be a lengthy amount of time to ask more questions. So when we get up, I'd appreciate if we just socialize and talk and not necessarily get into the technical things on the way to Salah or during dinner. I'd like to get to know you guys as well. So Jazakumullah khairan, subhanakallahumma wa bihamdik, ashhadu an la ilaha illa ant, astaghfiruka wa atubu ilayk. Wa sallallahu wa sallam ala nabiyyina Muhammad. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.
You want to say there then? Please go ahead. Yeah, he's good. Yeah, you can turn it on.
الله أكبر الله أكبر الله أكبر الله أكبر أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله أشهد أن محمد رسول الله أشهد أن محمد رسول الله حي على الصلاة حي على الصلاة حي على الفلاح حي على الفلاح الله أكبر الله أكبر لا إله إلا الله الله أكبر الله أكبر أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله أشهد أن محمدا رسول الله حي على الصلاة حي على الفلاح قد قامت الصلاة قد قامت الصلاة الله أكبر الله أكبر لا إله إلا الله.
استووا. الله أكبر. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين الرحمن الرحيم مالك يوم الدين إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين آمين. يا أيها الذين آمنوا اتقوا الله ولتنظر نفس ما قدمت لغد واتقوا الله إن الله خبير بما تعملون ولا تكونوا كالذين نسوا الله فأنساهم أنفسهم أولئك هم الفاسقون. لا يستوي أصحاب النار وأصحاب الجنة أصحاب الجنة هم الفائزون. لو أنزلنا هذا القرآن على جبل لرأيته خاشعا متصدعا من خشية الله وتلك الأمثال نضربها للناس لعلهم يتفكرون. هو الله الذي لا إله إلا هو عالم الغيب والشهادة هو الرحمن الرحيم. هو الله الذي لا إله إلا هو الملك القدوس السلام المؤمن المهيمن العزيز الجبار المتكبر سبحان الله عما يشركون. هو الله الخالق البارئ المصور له الأسماء الحسنى يسبح له ما في السماوات والأرض وهو العزيز الحكيم. الله أكبر. سمع الله لمن حمده ربنا لك الحمد حمدا كثيرا طيبا مباركا فيه من السماوات والارض ما شئت من شيء بعد اهل الثناء والمجد حق ما قال العبد الله اكبر
سبحان ربي الأعلى سبحان ربي
الله أكبر الله أكبر الله أكبر بسم الله الحمد لله رب العالمين الرحمن الرحيم مالك يوم الدين إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين آمين والسماء والطارق وما أدراك ما الطارق النجم الثاقب إن كل نفس لما عليها حافظ فلينظر الإنسان مما خلق خلق من ماء دافق يخرج من بين الصلب والترائب إنه على رجعه لقادر يوم تبلى السرائر فما له من قوة ولا ناصر والسماء ذات الرجع والأرض ذات الصدع إنه لقول فصل وما هو بالهزل إنهم يكيدون كيدا وأكيد كيدا فمهل الكافرين أمهلهم رويدا الله أكبر سمع الله لمن حمده الله أكبر الله أكبر الله أكبر الله أكبر الله أكبر الرحمن الرحيم الله أكبر سمع الله لمن حمده الله أكبر الله أكبر الله أكبر الله أكبر إياك نعبد صراط الذين الله أكبر سمي الله لمن حمده الله أكبر الله أكبر الله أكبر الله أكبر السلام عليكم ورحمة الله السلام عليكم ورحمة الله استغفر الله استغفر الله اللهم أنت السلام الله ولا يهمك I've probably heard it, but if it doesn't come to mind, look it up. But it's extremely slow, extremely slow. But you certainly learn how to read. And that's something that carries us back. One of your students. This is Mas. Mas, how are you? Where are you studying? Okay,